So for me, creativity is really, it's a validation of self, and it is a process that draws on all parts of the self. I see creativity as being a very broad kind of concept. I think everybody has creativity. Creativity is essential to survival. So that really defines how I think about creativity. I, as an artist, use certain methods and means and materials to express that, but I firmly believe that everybody has that ability to do that in some form or fashion in their life, whether it's writing, whether it's speaking, whether it's tinkering, so many different kinds of ways that our creativity is expressed. Well, I don't feel like there was there was a specific point at which some events happened that allowed me to embark on my career as a full-time artist. But there's never been a time in my life when I wasn't engaged in art. Um, the first thing I ever wanted to be as a kid was a fashion designer. So I do sketching. My dad was very good with his hands, always had wood and tools. So I would build doll furniture, do all kinds of things that were creative. My mother was very good at sewing and embroidery, so I learned some of those things from her. And, in my mind, I can't ever remember a time when I wasn't doing something artistic. There have been periods where I have not had the luxury of indulging in that to a great degree, but once I got to school, I was very interested in social issues, and I ended up getting a degree in urban studies because I felt like that allowed me to look at both social systems and physical systems. So I ended up majoring in community development, urban design and community development, kind of the emphasis on the urban design, sort of large scale design. So that was a creative exercise. I took architecture classes, design classes. And so within a professional realm, that allowed me to have, some degree of what I would call creativity, in terms of that planning process. I didn't start out in collage. I actually started out in really more realistic watercolor specifically as a medium. It was an area that I was introduced to really in high school. I had a wonderful art teacher in high school, and that was something that I learned from him. So when I had the opportunity many, many years later to take classes and to actually study, I started with watercolor. And at that point, I was living in Portland, Oregon. I got very involved in the Oregon Watercolor Society, met lots of other artists, and it was through that means and some of the workshops and other shows sponsored by the society that I was introduced to collage and water media and generally mixed media. So really understanding abstraction was something I was quite interested in because not having a formal art degree, I didn't really study classical art, art history or any of those things, but I was really very interested in understanding design and the principles of design. And that's what kind of propelled me into the area of abstraction, which I love. I'd say probably the majority of it is paper, but I also use fabric. I use other natural materials, occasionally metal, found objects. Really, there's no limit. I just love the idea of being able to assemble a variety of materials and to be able to draw on lots of different things to give color, pattern, interesting elements, that really draw a viewer into the piece. And oftentimes they're things that have, whether they're symbolic meaning or, some reference, cultural reference, those sorts of things. So I'm always on the lookout for, interesting things that appeal to the eye. So for the most part, the inspiration for my work comes from what I call cultural integration. So for a long time, I've been interested in history, understanding the paths that humanity has taken over millennia, because I believe that there is way more that binds us, both in terms of our heredity and the things that we know culturally. So in my work, I try to use materials and motifs and patterns and things that recognize and assert that, so that people have a visual understanding of those things that are common to all of us and what makes us human beings. I have a few pieces that are really about identity and sort of how we visualize ourselves, how we relate to other people, visualize ourselves in relation to other people. So, for instance, this diptych here, it's called Notions of Identity. So it's women, but women from different ages, from different ethnic groups, really, visualizing how women are portrayed and, within that, how we see ourselves as well. And this large piece here, I've done a few pieces of this series. I call them my wild women. And they are expressions of going back to the creative self, all that energy that we have, everything that comprises who we are, in full-blown color, technical. Well, I think a large part of it is making the process accessible. And by that I mean presenting information in a way that it's not intimidating. So for instance, I found that a lot of people come to art with a particular concept of what an artist is or what something should look like, or all of these parameters. And, maybe a little bit of hesitation or some other feeling that's holding people back from expressing their creativity. And this is one of the reasons I like abstraction, because nobody's saying, well, the nose isn't right, or your lips are in the wrong place, or, something like that. I think most of it is really just giving people a room, understanding that they're not going to be judged, or there's not a single answer or a single way to do things. And so within my classes, we do a lot of group kind of critiquing, for lack of a better term, but not critique in a judgmental way. It's really like, how might you finish this, or what might you do at this point in this process if it were yours, that kind of thing. I would say just start somewhere. Pick something to do that interests you, whether it's writing or drawing, whatever that happens to be, and use that as a point of departure. I think always, taking classes, exposing yourself to the arts in general, whether it's music or visual arts, performance, whatever it happens to be, are all things that can give you that energy, to move forward. And, surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded in a way, people who are interested in exploring their own creativity. Maybe you have a friend, you can take a class with, or, relative, who's maybe done some work in the arts. I feel very fortunate to be able to be doing this. It's, for me, having made that transition later in my life, as opposed to starting out there. You know, it's a little intimidating, you know, and I can't say that it's ever not intimidating because as my buddy next door, my incredible artist friend Alonzo, put on his little sticker, artwork is work. So it's never not work. It's always work, you know, as long as I can possibly pick up a brush or pick up a piece of paper or a pair of scissors or whatever it happens to be and just engage myself that way. So.